Obedience to de facto law. Article 15. No person, now notice that, person, shall be convicted of an offense in respect of an act or omission in obedience to the laws for the time being made and enforced by persons in de facto possession of the sovereign power, in and over the place where the act or omission occurs. Criminal Code of Canada, Article 15. It says no person. So here they're referring to the legal person, the juridical personality. But it says no person shall be convicted in respect to an offense that relates to an act or regulation. Highway Safety Code, Municipal Tax Act, those acts and regulations. So you can't be convicted of this offense or the omission to follow the act. So if you forget or if you don't follow this act, then your person, according to the criminal code, he can't be convicted or charged for failing to follow these acts. That's what Article 15 says. So, if the legal person, through omission, lack of his duty, failure to do his duty to the act, if he breaks it through his omission, he breaks the acts and the regulation, it or he, because it is a legal person, but he won't be charged, according to Article 15 in the Criminal Code. Black Laws Dictionary. Omission. A failure to do something. A neglect of duty. The complaint alleged that the driver had committed various negligent acts and omissions. The act of leaving something out. Something that is left out, left undone, or otherwise neglected. Disobeying a statute. 126. Everyone who, without lawful excuse, contravenes an act of Parliament by willfully doing anything that it forbids or by willfully omitting to do anything that it requires to be done is, unless a punishment is expressly provided by law, guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Article 126 of the Criminal Code. It starts out like this. Everyone. So we're going to pause here. We're going to say everyone can be a person, everyone can be an owner, and everyone can be a man. So, everyone who, without lawful excuse, breaks or omits to do what the act or regulation requires, is guilty of an offense punishable for up to 2 years. So now you have here an article that is stating that if you do indeed break or admit or omits to do what the act or regulation requires you to do, then you will be guilty of an offense if you can't produce a lawful excuse. So if your person breaks or omits the act or regulation, the person is guilty of an offense. This just contradicts what Article 15 says. It says that a person can't be held accountable or can't be guilty of an act or a regulation because it's a de facto government. Now here it's saying that you can be held accountable if you break the act or regulation, if you don't provide your lawful excuse. Now what would be your lawful excuse? So Article 15 is saying the person is not guilty for an omission to the act or regulation, but Article 126 is saying everyone, person, owner, and man, is indeed guilty to breaking an act and a regulation without lawful excuse. Now, if the acts and the regulations that they are creating is being done through a de facto government, de facto, what do you think your lawful excuse would be to them? Well, you find your lawful excuse, your reason, right in the code itself. We jump back to Article 15, and it says, you're not guilty to the laws for the time being made and enforced by de facto powers. Because these laws that they're enforcing, These laws that they're enforcing, for the time being, they're being enforced by de facto powers. And de facto power is an illegal power. It's not a recognized and established power. Therefore, if you give your lawful excuse by showing them that you know that they are de facto power, then you cannot be charged legally or lawfully in the criminal courts concerning breaking an act or a regulation. If you do not provide lawful excuse, if you do not make the distinction between a man and a legal person, then they will try and hold you accountable. If you do not make the distinction that they are in de facto powers and can only govern legal persons that give them the consent and give them the right to do so, then they'll try and hold you accountable. But if you produce your lawful excuse by showing them that they are de facto powers and that you are not accountable to their acts and regulations because you understand that you are a man, then you have established lawful excuse. So there is a way in law that you don't have to be accountable to acts and regulations, as you've seen. And if you admit or if you fail in your duty to do these acts and regulations, that you don't have to be charged. You don't have to let the corporations charge you. The whole thing starts with understanding what a lawful excuse is. Simply by stating that your powers to exercise to govern me, it's de facto. It comes through my agreement or my consent to this, and I do not consent. Therefore, I can establish lawful excuse. If you don't establish lawful excuse, then they have the right to govern you. It's one or the two. It's either you let them govern you and apply all these regulations to you, or you establish your lawful excuse by declaring the fact that you indeed are a man, and that you understand, or a woman, and that you understand that this government, this corporation, is de facto, and it takes consent. Very simple. If you haven't seen my video on the de facto government, then just watch the video first on de facto government and then come back and watch this one for an explanation of what de facto is.